This is a detail that was kind of tricky with the ICF. Our utility wanted us to have our meter on the front left side of the building, and that's a bedroom, so I can't just have a pipe poking into my basement or anything like that. It's a bedroom, so I can have it sticking out of the wall. So I had to make sure that the pipe would fit in the wall. So I dug a channel all the way down to full depth, and as you can see, the pipe does happen to fit in the wall. But the real struggle was getting the elbow at the bottom to fit through the wall. I went ahead and used a reducing elbow, so it goes from 1.5 inches that goes through the wall to 2 inch. And with compressible fluids like gas, you can neck down if you only have to make a short jump like this, because I mean, even if you go to the meter, it's 3/4 couplers going into the meter. So with gas, it's a function, the resistance is a function of the size and the length. So a 12-inch piece of a smaller size is pretty insignificant, but it makes it a heck of a lot easier to get to the wall, and all of a sudden the elbow fits behind the drywall. So this is one of the leaks we found, and it was in a reducing tee. I don't know if you can see, but the cut on it is pretty weebly wobbly because I did it with the Portaband. I think you really need to do it with a pipe cutting tool, but see I'm missing like a thread here. And all the ones that I pulled off that leaked have kind of looked like that. So I'm thinking it's very critical that they have to be completely flat. And something I started doing on the later ones, and I haven't had any leaks further down the line, is I was taking a 36 grit disc on an angle grinder, like a flat disc, and grinding them totally flat, and then using it's stupid, but built speed square to make sure that they really were flat and perpendicular to the pipe. So I think I'd recommend using that pipe tool that you use that goes around the pipe, because that will at least make sure that it's square, even if it takes you forever. So I'm going to go ahead and clean these threads off, probably polish this up, and chase it with a thread again, and then put it back in service. So this is the procedure we've started using for taping and doping our threads. If you notice, these are factory threads and they're all dinged up. They come from Menards like that. So what we've been doing to try and have our best chance at getting that to seal is we'll go ahead and hit this with a wire wheel. After I hit it with the wire wheel, I'll go ahead and wrap it with this Blue Monster PTFE thread tape. It is critical that you do the minimum 3 wraps, which seems like a lot. It seems like you only need 1 because the stuff is so thick, but I've had leaks if I only do 1, and I haven't had a leak if I do 4. So I have been following the directions closely. Depending on how strict your utility is, you may have to use a different type of tape, or you may not be allowed to use tape. A lot of municipalities don't want the blue or the white, they want yellow. However, this tape, even though it is white, specifically says it's allowable for assemblies carrying natural gas or methane, propane, butane, all that. So it's definitely fine for gas pipe. And then on top of my tape, I go ahead and use this Blue Monster PTFE pipe thread sealant. This is the only stuff I've used so far that seems to work consistently. So again, this is white. The utility probably wants you to use yellow if you live in a stricter county or town. But it specifically says you have to read the back. So there's if you look in the back, there's a huge list of allowable process fluids. And I mean, this is mostly for industrial use. So there's all sorts of things you can use it for, like gasoline and alcohol and butane. But it also specifically says that it's acceptable for natural gas. So that means it's okay. When you're wrapping your threads, you want to always make sure you're wrapping in the clockwise direction. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. And personally, I am just familiar which way it goes by feel, so it's actually hard for me to wrap it when it's on a stand because I get messed up. But always go counterclockwise, or clockwise. Sorry, always go clockwise. And then when you thread your fitting on, the fitting will not disrupt the tape. So like I said, you want to make sure you go around at least 3 times, so 4 is probably appropriate. I don't have a free hand here. And after I tape this, I like to rub the threads in a little bit, just to get it nice and secure. And the next step is you want to take approved pipe dope and go ahead and coat the threads. Usually you want to mix this stuff up because it has a kind of like a solvent. It has a kind of liquid carrier, and then it has like the actual PTFE, so there's like multiple components to it. If you don't get it nice and mixed up, you'll get a different distribution than the manufacturer intended. I typically like to put a big glob on and then kind of drag it around, and actually I did not get a good scoop, but normally you should be able to do it pretty much in one smooth motion. And this is actually quite a bit heavier than you actually need. So you do have to check the other side, make sure you can see underneath, because you'll miss a whole section. It's important to make sure you check the underside too, because depending on your orientation, you might not see a gigantic spot you're missing. Now, if you read the label for this stuff, typically you're only supposed to put pipe dope on the male threads, so this side, but on pipes larger than 1 1/4 inch, and this is 2 inch, you're supposed to put a little bit of pipe dope on the female thread too. So I'm definitely going to do that before. So this is a 2-inch T, and you want to coat just the first couple threads with pipe dope. You don't want to go all the way down because you'll end up getting pipe dope into the female thread. So as you can see, I got some dope on the external threads, made sure not to go too far in. And then I like to, when I'm trying to put a pipe fitting on, especially one with kind of damaged threads, I like to turn it backwards a little bit until you can feel it seat into the thread. And then you start going forward, and then that way you know you're not cross-threaded. With pipe this big, it's pretty hard to cross-thread, you'll feel it right away. But you should be able to turn that on and then grab your 24-inch pipe wrench and get it nice and tight. These 3 components make up a union, and you use unions whenever you have to be able to undo a pipe later. One of the frustrations with black pipe is if you have a leaking joint, you have to pretty much undo all the connections after that joint to be able to spin that joint to tighten it back down. And a union lets you not have to go all the way to the end of your piping run. You want to use as few unions as possible because they're kind of tricky to seal, and they tend to unseal themselves over time with vibration and movement. But this is an example actually of a union that I bought from Menards that was damaged from the factory. We installed it, and then we just couldn't get it to seal. And if you inspect the face of the union, you'll know right away usually. You won't know if you have a good union, but you'll know if you have a bad union. And this one's got a big old nick in the sealing surface, so that never had a chance. You're not supposed to use any sort of sealant on these union faces. It should be a metal-to-metal seal, but I have seen some people use pipe dope on this face. I think it's probably a horrible practice that gets used in practice if you have an installed union that is not sealing. The correct repair would be to remove the union at the threads and then replace it with a new union. These are actually pretty expensive. These are about 18 bucks a piece in this size. And that's the cheapo Chinese Menards ones that I think are like STZ. I have not been having a lot of luck with a lot of the Menards plumbing fittings, particularly these close couplings. And from what I'm reading, it sounds like you probably want to pay the premium for domestically made fittings. If you go on supplyhouse.com or something like that, you'll see bluefin or STZ fittings from China that are like $2, and then the equivalent in a domestic made Ward fitting will be like $6. And you're like, why would I pay 3 times as much for the same thing? And I don't know, maybe I'm just having bad luck, but I think for a large part of it is just I'm getting fittings with threads that aren't well formed. I had a cap that looked like it had either cooled incorrectly in the mold, or the mold wasn't filled completely because it was completely warped. And so the threads were straight, but the base casting was warped, and so the outer diameter of the female threads clearly wasn't the same diameter, and that thing never sealed. And when you're doing this kind of work, there's probably 100 fittings in this building, and you don't want to be taking things back apart again when you find out they leak, because usually you have to take a lot apart to get to one leaky fitting. And I wish I would have paid the the 3x premium on the fittings to not have to deal with that. So I might recommend going with the expensive fittings right off the bat.